I had a pretty eye-opening experience reviewing the 8 samples from the 8 factories. Normally, I don't spend a lot of time analyzing the samples because I focus on the incremental changes I've made. But this time, I had to look at everything from the top, holistically, and it was genuinely educational, if not a little overwhelming. When I went through this process last year of trying to find a factory, I really prioritized the price of the pants. It was my understanding that as long as you can follow the pattern, nothing else really mattered. Well, technically, they did follow the pattern, and it was then I learned other things did matter. Price wasn't everything. You can't put a price on confidence, on trust, and knowing your partner would do what you would have done, which is hopefully the right thing. My previous samples from way back all came from factories that specialized in pants. They only needed the main front and back pattern pieces, and they'd use their own patterns for the rest, such as the pocket bags, fly, waistband, etc. They didn't even need me to provide the trim. But this time for the experiment, it was different. The 8 cut-and-sew factories I worked with produced a much wider range of garments, so they needed more explicit direction when it came to construction. And because of that, my review ended up mostly focusing on the interiors of the pants. And honestly, it was a very mixed bag. Well, up until now, I never cared much about the interior. But all else equal, I suppose it's one of those things you're going to favor the place that does it well versus a place that doesn't. And also, for evaluation purposes, it does give you some insight into the factory's experience, their mindset, and perhaps their ability to do this long term and or work on other projects. Now, I'm sure all the factories could actually do what I wanted them to do if I explained everything and repeated myself again and pointed out their mistakes. But I'd rather work with a factory that gets it right by default and listens to what I tell them the very first time. Because even if you explain things clearly, there's always that lingering doubt. Will they remember? Or will they forget? Will I need to repeat myself every time I need to get something from them? These factories are juggling dozens, if not hundreds of clients each. They're not going to change the way they work and their processes just for a little order that I make. It's much easier for everyone involved if I just find a partner who is already doing things the way I want them done. Last year, the factory had a pretty good price. In fact, I found factories in this experiment that had very similar prices to that one. They're all very appealing for that reason. But once I received the samples, I just didn't think the work was very good. Because while the factories did technically make my pants, what they made was just barely acceptable. I mean, it was close enough. If you didn't look too hard, it looked fine. But for me, someone who's been working on this project for so long, I easily noticed those mistakes, and they really bothered me. Not to mention, one of those lingering thoughts in the back of my head is, will there be more and more of these mistakes and shortcuts? I mean, there's only a few now, but these things grow, right? At some point, the pants won't be what I've designed. They'll be just whatever the factory decides to make. And those errors and shortcuts are just going to take over what I'm trying to achieve here. Again, most people aren't going to notice, they're not going to care, but that's the point. This is my project. I notice and I care. And I'm not doing this project with my name on it, only to turn it into something I'm not going to be happy with. Yes, there are sacrifices and compromises I'm inevitably going to have to make, but I'd rather shop around and try to find those compromises elsewhere. In fact, I think I'd rather just make the compromise on price rather than good quality. Because as consumers, you can find middling pants and clothes anywhere and everywhere. What I'm trying to do is something different. And if that means increasing the price, so be it. I know it's hard to swallow. We're all thinking about price. I was too last year. But this year, I have seen the light. I hope my content, such as this podcast and the videos, will show it's a very small price to pay. By actually considering more factories and looking at prices outside my initial range, I think I'm actually getting more value. Not just for me, but for you all, for anyone who is interested in wearing these clothes. So I'm kind of excited for this month's video where I cover the evaluation of the experiment. In hindsight, it might be a little surface level, but I think it's a good introduction if you're a bit of a casual participant. And of course, we can always make more detailed videos down the line. Now, regarding other projects, they've been very slow. In fact, I don't think I've gotten any samples in the past month, while the factories have been delayed, really delayed. I think they've just gotten orders from all the big clients that they have. That said, my swim trunks project has been interesting because of how much research I've had to do on suppliers since there's just a bunch of odd trim involved. I may have found the direct supplier behind a well known reseller in the US for outdoor technical fabric. But the ordering process has been weird. I'm pretty sure they screwed up my fabric shipment, so I'm going to have to follow up next week. Next week, I'm also heading out of town, so I guess it's really not going to be a big deal as long as I can get it here when I come back. Maybe I'll be able to get some content when I'm away. In New York, there's just not enough space. But elsewhere, the possibilities will be endless. Let's just hope that the hustle of New York comes with me.